welcome to the latest episode of Enterprise Mindset here.
Alex. And
Ruthi.
Who's not on mute this time. So yay. We are jumping off right into it. We're doing a little bit of a special episode today, jumping into the weird and wacky environment known as HR and the job market. So we have a couple of topics, and it's queuing up to a little side research project that Alex has been doing, which we may do as a special episode. So more to come on that. So I have brought today LinkedIn as of this recording day, which is September 8th. LinkedIn came out with some labor market data that applies, back to July and June of 2023. So we'll use that as some context as to where things are kind of going, or where they stand now and how they're changing. And then Ruthi, what have you decided to bring to the HR episode?
I was going to talk about interview questions, or rather interview experiences, and then I realized that all of mine are very boring. And so if you have a fun one, feel free to sprinkle it in, but I'm shifting my topic to what you guys look for in future teammates or in employees, or managers in the case, and sort of what are the qualities that you look for above and beyond the skill sets. And if there's any other thoughts that come to mind around, like when you're hiring for stuff, what are you looking for? Or reverse, when you're interviewing, what are you looking for from the employee?
Cool. Yeah, Alex doesn't have his own, since his topic warrants an entirely separate episode. Kicking off with the LinkedIn labor market data. So they they have a lot of data from everybody that's applying, a lot of the job seekers with their applications. They've just done a lot of announcements on integrating AI into the profiles to rewrite your about me or some of your skill section your headlines, which I played around with the other day just to play around with it. And it was interesting to see what it came up with based on what my profile was. And they say they're leveraging the database of all the professionals and how they're writing it, but it's fun to play around with, but make sure you keep
can we just pause there before we go on their report? So now
Mhm.
you can have LinkedIn automatically generate your about me. Is that what I just heard you say?
Mm-hmm. And it'll optimize it for like their system, basically. Yeah.
there's also
It's only for the premium things, but if you're gonna there's a number of things on the premium side where, like, if you just bought a month and did all the things really quickly, you would get all the benefit without having to pay for a year.
currently about $45 a month. So but also with just straight up LinkedIn posts, you start writing a post just to the whole community, say, do you want AI to help you? And you can type in very little and it will generate quite a bit. So
what is the point?
That's been my question. I'm like, wonderful. But basically just the bots create the content, we get to read the content, and if we want, we can reply and then use AI for the replies. Also in messages, in mail, also has AI suggestions for the messages.
Because if you build it up enough, you get all of the benefit without having to do anything, which has always worked. That has always worked.
Oh my goodness. For those listening, this face palm is real. And what immediately comes to mind, and I know this is a divergent, but I think it's an important one. It's very much on topic for the things that we have talked about in the past, which is, okay, so I don't participate on many social media channels anymore. I used to, right? And it's just, I don't have the time. I don't have the patience for it. The only one that I sort of dabble in occasionally is LinkedIn. And because most of the time it's because Alex and Dave are saying, oh, there's this thing on LinkedIn, you should check out this post. And then I go over there and take a look. But this to me is like the ultimate in why would I bother with LinkedIn anymore, right? The whole point of it was that it was sort of some sort of signal of, semi-validated, here's what people have done in the past. It was a way for people to talk in a professional space on social media to connect with other people. But now to your point, like it's bots writing for people, maybe, but like, do you really read that much on LinkedIn? Maybe this is my bias because I don't much, like I said, I don't participate in much by way of social media, but it feels like my initial reaction to what you just described is Microsoft introduced AI into the platform, and that in and of itself is going to render that platform almost useless for actually signaling information about people.
Mhm. Well, and
Or
this is one
maybe
of those
just levels
fundamental
the
questions
playing
of,
field because everyone's going to do it anyways. Sorry, I'll stop.
no, it's not. I think it is one of those things where there's an underlying assumption that more productivity equals good. And everybody is optimizing to that. And that's not necessarily the case, right? You do I need to be able to create 12,000 posts like instantaneously? No. Why? Because I can't remember all the things that I'm putting out there sort of under my name, right? Um, so I can't back up what it is I have been saying, but it's basically just like a virtue signal of, hey, I'm really productive, I'm a thought leader in this space. But then if you get into a meeting and people start poking around on, okay, do you actually know your stuff? Because it seems like you do, because you posted 12,000 times on LinkedIn. You're probably not going to be able to back up that perception, right? um there's there's that interesting case study with Betty Crocker instant cake mix, where when they first introduced it in the 50s, it was too easy, so people wouldn't buy it. So they had to change it to just add an egg so that they actually felt like they were doing something, in order to justify that, yes, I had a part in creating this cake. And then sales went through the roof. I feel like we're going to get to a similar part with AI where if it's too easy, you're just not going to do it because there'll be too many ideas for you to be able to try to do. Um, and there's going to need to be some friction there to actually have the value. Um, yeah.
I kind of wonder the quality of content, but quality of post. I mean, there's a few things there. So it depends. It could be totally that LinkedIn's optimizing for the wrong thing. They're trying to get more word count, more posts, more some sort of activity figure that they're going after.
Mm-hmm.
I remember from YouTube that doesn't always work well. And it turns out you can throw people down some pretty bad rabbit holes. And people will watch a lot of minutes, which wrong metric for the platform. But I wonder from the improvement of content or quality of content, is it improved based on people's grammar is better because you have AI assisting, their grammar? Or are the insights better because AI could suggest some related links and reading? I mean, there's some ways in which it could elevate the quality of content, but also it would definitely, to your point, hide the individual.
Right.
So that individual, like probably in their emails, is maybe not so good unless they're using, I guess, Google Duo or Cohort or something like that. Copilot from Microsoft.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Right.
gonna be an interesting world.
Either that, or it puts more emphasis on everybody becoming a video star, where the only posts you'll actually take will be screen grabs or walkthroughs of their thinking. Like, I know my feed has exploded with video stuff lately, where it's not just enough to have an idea and just kind of mention it. You've got to actually like screen share with you talking about it as you go through. And that, while I appreciate the authenticity of that, like, I just don't have that amount of time to sit and spend on any kind of social media. That's not how I use it. That's not how I choose to spend my time, unless it's something that hits me exactly in that moment. Like there was that Will Reynolds thing where it's like, oh, this is an interesting thing that he's doing. Totally different concept from the way that I would, approach something. So it's share worthy because it was interesting, and again, it was so different from the way that I typically view it. I wanted to actually like, oh, hey, check this out, this is kind of a cool use of GPT and its plugins.
Which we can throw that link into the notes.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, labor market data before Ruthi's mind is blown even more.
I'll save my notes for later. If anyone's wanting to hear more, you just let me know. We can talk about signals and dampening and what the future of interviewing looks like, given everything you guys just talked about. I mean, there's a lot more to unpack, but we shall proceed with these schedules.
Right. So yeah, just laying some context into the spot that we kind of find ourselves. I think that everybody that's that's been around and paying attention for the last year or 2 years knows that it's a weird market. There's the recession that never came, there or is still coming, depending on what your leadership believes. So there are strategic moves that are made off of that. So according to LinkedIn's labor market data, the global labor market declined in its hiring rate. It's 3% slower than between June and July. The pace of decline is slowing in some of the more developed countries, places like US, UK, Australia, Netherlands, Sweden, etc. But that's just kind of a baseline. That's not necessarily the interesting stuff. Where the interesting stuff comes in is based on LinkedIn's data. All of the job seekers are actually applying to more positions. As they said, it's a more intensive job seeking for the people. So a 25 to 30% increase in the amount of applications each job seeker is submitting. Then the interesting thing that stood out to me is a clear mismatch between what the workforce wants and what management is trying to go for. Again, based on their data, purely remote jobs are shrinking. However, 44% of applications using LinkedIn in July of 2023 were for remote positions. So that's a huge chunk. However, only 9% of the job postings in the US offered remote work in that same period. So, tiny bit with a huge amount of applications there. And that's down from 18% in the prior year. Hybrid was 13% of job postings, which has increased from 8% a year ago, and hybrid is getting 20% of views and applications from the job seekers, which if you do the math, the in-person piece, the job postings for in-person roles, it accounts for 78%. However, it would only get about 36% of applications. So kind of that mismatch between the workers want the remote, they want the hybrid, they want the options, right? Whereas the management necessarily is trying to bring people back. And the mismatch in priorities there. And you've seen that in any number of news articles on how, company X is demanding that people come in and they're tying the bonus compensation or even your own, portions of your paycheck to how often you are in the office building, which is kind of bonkers. But yeah, so anyway, that jumped out to me. What jumps out to you guys? What are your thoughts on the hybrid, in-person or remote situation we find ourselves in?
Ruthi, do you want to go first? You want me? I think some of the part with the remote, just looking at those numbers, there's always multiple ways to look at any kind of figure. The other piece about it is, let's say I'm a CPA, certified public accountant, I'm applying to all the jobs with a certain level of expertise or years of experience or something like that.
Right.
Doesn't matter if I'm in wherever, I'm going to come across that remote job. So a lot of job seekers are going to be seeing those remote jobs just because they're looking for a job title and the location is either where they are or remote. Well, a lot of people then are going to be seeing that remote job to be shared a little bit and viewed more publicly. So a little back and forth on that one. But I definitely, to the point about other news articles talking about the desire from the employee standpoint and the anti-desire from the employer standpoint. You got a mismatch, and there definitely is a mismatch. Some of this is, I think, just sunk cost, where you have a bunch of real estate because you have a building, you have a long-term
Absolutely.
lease, you're locked into a 5, 10-year, 25, who knows year, rent, lease, own, whatever situation. You invested a ton of money, like each office, even those stupid fuzzy cubicle walls are thousands of dollars. It's insane what companies pay for a lot of that stuff.
Mhm.
So the cost that they've sunk into having a space for an employee is significant, and they want some kind of return on that. Return being, I guess, usage. But yeah, I struggle with that one because there's productivity gains from being remote. But I think there's also a threat of burnout too, of we're not taking the same number of breaks as we did in the past because it's the next meeting is 3 clicks away. You
Yep.
close, you click on the next meeting, you hit join, you're in the next one. You used to walk from meeting room to meeting room. You used to have side conversations. You used to have more kind of a chit chat because there's people in the meeting room and you're waiting outside, or not everybody has arrived yet. And to one of my prior employers, I always thought from an hour-long meeting, the most important minutes were about the 5 to 10 before and the last 10.
Mhm.
Because the 5 to 10 before was when everybody's still kind of milling in and getting into the room. People are chit chatting, they're more open. And they're talking about, oh, actually, this VP just slammed down this thing, and I got to focus all my energy on that. Yes, we've been working on this project for 3 months, but I don't have any time to move this forward. And they will be realistic with you and real about you and telling you what the context, greater context is going on, not just that project or that meeting, but they'll tell you that greater context in those informal chit chat moments. And then the last 5 or 10 is when you get down to business and say, oh my gosh, we're about to leave this meeting. Who's going to do what? And all the work gets assigned out. And those are the only minutes that are like, I mean, the discussion in between usually is fruitful and, moves things in the right way. But those minutes on the end was actually when everything happened. And what I've noticed a lot with remote is that we stick to this straight agenda of this particular project, but we lose that greater context. We don't really understand where people are coming from. If they, had their kid in a hospital last night and they're barely awake right now, and then we're asking like, where's your stuff of this, project? You need to have that context. And to miss that creates a culture change and the way that we
Mhm.
work with each other and trying to reintroduce some of those elements so that we can create those social bonds and connections. Because if work is just work, it's very easy to leave that company. You create a community and create bonds, you create loyalty. So I think that's the other struggle from the employer standpoint is they
Mhm.
don't know how to present that culture. And they're really, really stuck in the culture that they had that was in person. And they don't know how to transition into a new way of doing things. Is it Slack? Is it Teams? Is it both? Is it that on top of 5 other, communication technologies? Is it emojis? Is that what makes people happy? Like, what's it take? And then, I mean, speaking from a generational difference, you still have problems between newer generations who have very, very particular thoughts about how emojis are used or GIFs, and then older generations who are more GIF heavy, but they don't understand the emojis and context. I mean, like, there's communication issues. I mean, there's core communication issues just from having a team of 5 who likely are a variety of ages. I don't know, Ruthie, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna play off of that one because I think there's the cultural aspect, which is key. And I think Alex, you outlined a number of the different elements that go into that sort of, it's really hard to build a community in a remote setting. And particularly if the prior culture came from a very strong in-person situation, like that transition, super difficult. You need very specific things in place. You need leaders, you need tools who understand the leaders, you need people to be able to facilitate those. And that sort of segues into my related thought on this topic, which is there's also a pretty high transaction cost on information exchange that seems to exist more in the remote space than the in-person space if you're missing some of those basic tools and facilitation pieces, which is if I'm a manager of a team or a manager of a team of teams, the information flows might not be as rich than if I'm down the hall or getting coffee and I can go, oh, hey, like what you've been working on, or like what's aggravating you, like that in a sort of brush by the hall conversation, way easier to do than, manager approaches employee, tell me what's the problem, right? Like that's a very different dynamic. And so I think that the information flows very differently in a remote setting, takes a lot of adaptation to get to a point where it's a seamless, and it's a very different way of working. And I've seen a couple of different blog articles, Bloomberg articles talking about, decreases in productivity since sort of the onset of COVID and this sort of shift to remote work. And there's sort of a question mark around like, where is that coming from? Is it remote work as such? Are there shifts in the way people are working? And maybe that's some of the things that we see the different companies hiring and wanting to do in person. Maybe they're reacting to that, or perhaps it's a perception of decreased productivity, or we're sort of, maybe your team is doing stuff, but because you don't have the proper information flows, you're seeing a slowdown. Not because people aren't working, maybe they are, maybe they're slacking at home, maybe they're doing their laundry, right? That could be, or maybe you're just, the transaction cost of that information flowing has changed. So that was one of my thoughts.
I wouldn't classify laundry as slacking. Like anybody who's got kids knows that the sheer volume of laundry is a job in and of itself.
True story, but if I'm in the office, I can't pause to go put my towels in the dryer. Like
right.
That's not a thing that happens when I'm in person all day. That is a thing that happens at home. I don't know. It's an interesting one. And I know that some of the backlash to companies saying like, we got to be in person, or we're gonna have a heavier emphasis on in person, is now you've got companies and recruiters who are taking the approach of, hey, you want to be remote, come work for us. And that's a very successful strategy on the flip side. So I suspect that these sorts of mechanisms, we're going to sort of see an equilibrium come out. We're just not there yet.
Well, I think one of the things that has been a common through point of all of our discussions this year has been, are you paying attention to the right metrics, right? Yeah. Or commonly understood, quote unquote, right metrics could actually be the ones that are harming you rather than the ones you should be paying attention to. So I think that's one of the things where the management has to challenge itself to be like, okay, do these old lines of thinking in terms of productivity per person, are they good enough for the situation we find ourselves in now, right? Because you have to allow some slack in order to create the culture of what you want it to be, right? Because you're going to have to, if you're doing fully remote, you will have to invest and prioritize like online trivia things or silly little get-togethers or team meetings or all of these things that will, quote unquote, take away from your productive time. But really, honestly, if people feel a part of something, they will do more work. They will do better work because they're invested. Right.
I think that's an important point I just want to pause on and like emphasize here, which is if it is indeed a cultural phenomena that we're running up against with the shift from in-person to remote, and we're missing the communities, then to that point, the answer might be get people back in person. That's where we build the culture. If that's not actually feasible because now we're in a different world, the answer might also be you've got to invest in the team building stuff, which can't just be online trivia. No one likes online trivia. Okay, maybe that's a very strong statement.
Some people do.
Maybe
I'm not one of them, but some
people
do.
That's not community building. That's button pushing. Like actually building teams is things like, oh, we're going to fly people in and spend a week together. We're going to go and do a company retreat. We're going to do meaningful get-togethers, not just we'll happen to be in the same room every once in a while. Like that doesn't cut it, which is a big ask, and you better be sure that it's a cultural problem and not something like information costs.
I kind of wonder if it's talked about kind of the normalization of this and where this goes. I wonder if a lot of this really is just getting to, I think, properly a life-work balance, but trying to figure out how do you set that up in a way where people are productive and they care and they're connected to their work, but they also are able to take care of the rest of their lives as well? There isn't such stark interference as, stereotypical 80s, 90s kind of employee, where you better be in your office from 9 to 5, otherwise you're not going to be around anymore. Like, there's there are many changes that we're going through as a part of this. Some of it, I think, is much more friendly to families, to caregiving, to the rest of life that just interferes with the workday that you have to somehow work around. Like,
I I remember you talk about work-life balance. I tried to get one of my favorite European colleagues to apply for a remote kind of management role. I said, you would be perfect for this. You need to do this. And they came back with, why? I will lose vacation time. I will work harder and I'm going to work weird hours. No, I'm going to stay in Europe. I'm like, I can't argue with that. You guys have a better system, for the workers. So yeah, it is an interesting change. And I think needed too. Yeah.
There was another element of your report that I wanted to talk about, which was that increase in application numbers.
Mm-hmm.
It was sort of what could increase in application per person. Is that what it was?
Yeah, so more intensive job seeking. So it's 25 to 30% increase in the number of applications people are submitting.
So I'm curious about the technology question behind those numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Because the phrasing makes it seem like people are more intensively applying. They're spending more hours applying, which may be the case. But it could also be easier to apply. And then I think, the advent of AI, we probably don't see it fully reflected in the numbers that were just shared. But I bet if we look at 2024 numbers, we might see that even further increased, because now all of a sudden you have an AI helping you apply for a bunch of stuff. So the cost of per application is much, much lower.
Right. Are you familiar with ladders?
No.
The site ladders. So its shtick is that it will only apply for things $100,000 or more for a salary. So one of their sales pitches is that you will, for an extra amount, they will automate your applying. So anything that fits your job role, they'll submit your cover letter and your application for you on your behalf. So then you just get a summary report of all the things that you applied to without doing any of it. Right. And it's like, that's one particular way. I see why that's appealing. Again, personally, this is where I think that's too efficient. And based on that technology piece, it is fairly easy on LinkedIn to filter things very specifically to remote roles in this section, targeting this particular job title, easy apply. So then you just go pop, 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 and now all of a sudden you have 300 job applications. It might be to companies that you may or may not enjoy working for, but if you get your foot in the door, then you at least have a foot in the door to have those conversations and or practice your interviewing skills if you're out of practice, right?
Two quick thoughts. One,
Mm-hmm.
there's a whole resume scanning systems, ATS, there's the acronym for them, that are out there that look at basically it's a keyword match score between your resume, potentially the cover letter, depends on the system, and then the job description. So it strips it all down to basically base keywords, strips your resume down to base keywords, looks at the match percentage. What I've been seeing from recruiters is they used to allow 70% match and above. Now they're at like 90% match and above, because they're getting basically so many applications. So if you had a default application, default resume, your match score is not going to be great. Heard of some success of basically throwing stuff into ChatGPT or GPT and saying, I'm going to send you a job description and then a resume. Please compare the two and improve the resume to better fit the job description. And it'll say, great, paste them. You paste both in and it'll update, basically create an updated resume that includes more of those terms and a higher match percentage. So if you're just blanket applying either via automation in ladders or, a little bit more manual with easy applying LinkedIn, you're not getting the benefit of that. Basically having something very personalized and tied.
Right.
One real quick thought though, we need to come up with a better phrase for human centric or too bot centric, something shorter than that, of saying like the process is too artificial and the process is not human enough, human involved, my own human myself involved. I don't know. We got to come up with a phrase like that because we got that problem.
Mm-hmm.
How do you say something is too bot-like? And then
I
my last
think about that a lot, right? So this is hiring. These are the people that you get to work with. And on the one hand, maybe going forward, you want to hire for the skill set that's very good at with working with different machines, right?
Yeah.
That is something you're filtering for in many cases. But that's perhaps not the only skill set we want to optimize for. And so I'm thinking, both as sort of somebody who's going to be hiring in the future, how might I structure the job application itself, the hiring process in a way that makes it so that I can find the right candidate, knowing that the number of applicants is going to be growing and growing with the ease of applying to lots and lots of different jobs. Like that's sort of a curious question. And then on the flip side, how do I, as a job seeker, like what role do I play in that? Like, how much do I optimize? How do I make myself stand apart as more human, so to speak, in a world of bot and written resumes? That
I think
is,
there's
yeah.
two
Go.
sides. So this was going to be my last one on this was, I think in my future thought, I'm still sticking with the idea that LinkedIn will become the new resume. Your profile will be it, and that's it. You won't have to have a separate file even. Because it's just the behemoth that's out there. But to the next point of what's really missing is that we have job descriptions that are heavily based upon experience and resumes that are based on experience. And what both really need is skills. Mm-hmm. And from the job description writing standpoint, we need a better system or better way to help us put down complex thoughts. So I need a supervisor who can handle tough employee situations, also $1 million plus contract negotiations, and some other things. Like these are actual skills, though. And then from a resume standpoint, you also need a list saying that I've done tough situations with this. I've done this, this, and this. Specific enough, or through skills tests, which LinkedIn has some, but they don't really push with the job description saying you need these skills to pass to apply to this job. Like, we're still missing the skills element all across the board. And so we're just talking about ourselves and our general experience by years versus specific skill sets. But both systems are failing at that. So I think it's across the board.
Mm-hmm. And right, there's the skill sets, but now we have these lovely AI tools that can help you write those. Which maybe this is a topic for another episode, but one thing that your last couple of statements had me thinking is like, what's the price tag on this? Like, how much should I, or do I, maybe not should, let's just do I at the moment as a job applicant have to pay in order to even just compete in this market? Like the fact that you had said like LinkedIn has all these AI premium features and it's at least a $45 per month. Maybe you can just do it one time, but that means it's $45 just to play the game. Like,
every
that
month
is an important dynamic in our labor market.
Yeah.
I think
there's an important distinction too with human psychology and behavior where we will always underestimate how long it will take us to get the new job, right? So you'd think, oh, it's just going to be $45 a month. I'll do it the one time, and then I'll have my job, and I'll have an offer in 2 weeks. Nah, the one interview could take you 6 weeks depending on the type of company that you're going for. And that's one thing that at least I do think there's a split between the large incumbent players where if you look at those descriptions, they will say apply on company website. So they are adding friction to the process just because they won't accept automated whatever. I think the companies that will accept the automated ones are probably they're going to be the smaller ones that the people are wearing multiple hats. They need the role. They probably need the role more than the other companies, but you're just going to have to put up with that flood of applicants because you're doing the easy apply, right? Yeah.
Yeah, there's expense on all sides too. Thinking as a smaller business or agency, I mean, to have LinkedIn Recruiter, I think a month of that is over $200. There's some of those systems are way more than that too.
Right. Ruthie, you look sad.
I am.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned about cost and the barrier to entry kind of piece of it. I think there's a knowledge barrier to entry to it, and Dave alluded to like doing a smaller, more focused episode talking about some of those learnings that at least I've picked up on in the last year, and kind of how things are different from in-person to remote and the application process and systems behind things and how to optimize against those systems, deal with it, all the rest of that kind of stuff. But I mean, Dave, we talked about it a bit, and your comment was that I'm a person who basically looks at systems and gets really involved with them and gets really focused on, okay, what is the greater system that's creating the situation, and trying to tear apart each piece of it and trying to understand how does each element of it work.
Right.
Which is not a skill set that are an interest that a lot of people will spend the time towards, nor do they have that kind of time to spend it towards that or interest to spend it on that kind of stuff. So that's really difficult, and it's painful to see because sometimes on LinkedIn, you'll see people's posts saying, I know this is not as professional as I normally am, but I'm on my wit's end. I've been doing DoorDash and gig work because I'm trying to make ends meet, but now my credit cards are maxed out with payments and I need a job. And I wonder, and they say, I've applied to 500, 600, 1,000 jobs, whatever it was. And I always wonder, based upon just some knowledge of how some of these systems work and the barriers that exist due to those systems, of were they applying in a way where they're going to win against this current setup, this environment, or were they playing and getting stuck by the barrier, throwing resumes against basically a wall that is always keeping them out?
Yes.
And you never know, but it's just, man, it's painful to see. A lot of people are technical recruiters and recruiters that got hit really hard with a lot of the tech layoffs. So they at least will know, but others probably don't.
Yeah. Well, but that's a good point. If you look at all of the slowdowns are not equal in the types of industries, right? So, tech employment is down quite a bit this year. You would think that some of those would be savvy enough to figure out, okay, this is how this is kind of working, moving forward. I will say, my comment on one of the reasons I enjoy being friends with you is that when I get frustrated and at my wit's end at that point, my initial instinct is to just say, F this, burn it down. Which is not at all your reaction, and that's what I appreciate. Which is what I get up, I walk the dog, and then I'm okay. So yeah, I do think that many people are stuck in that because this is not a skill set that you would be taught in school how to think, right? What were you told when you were going to school? It was go to school, get a job, have some network, a tiny bit of network that most people underutilize anyway, and you'll get some jobs. That's it. That's the other thing with the LinkedIn AI posting, right? It's one thing to be the quote unquote influencer that has X number of followers, but how many of those followers or those friends on Friendster are actually going to help you with your job search when you need help, right? And not just hit the like button on your post, you know. Which there should be some sentiment switch. Like if somebody's saying their dog died, don't give a thumbs up as an option. That is a mixed signal. Like, you know. Anyway, Ruthie, you wanted to say something. I
You
cut you
covered
off.
it a bit, and I'll just
Okay.
put a finer point on it, which is you've got at least two groups. You've got the folks who have had a job and are now all of a sudden in the job market. And the last time they were in the job market, everything looked very different, and the systems were quite different, and they don't even know that it's changed, or they might have an inkling, but they don't know what to do about it. And then you also have, say, the student market who's coming in, they're being told, go get a job. Some of them, sure, like savvy with the technology, can figure it out, right?
Right.
But it's a bit of a different world, and it's hard to teach that in a college course. Let's say you wanted to, it's still going to be difficult, in part because it's rapidly changing. It's like trying to teach SEO in a college course. Well,
Right.
what's your syllabus? Are you updating it regularly enough? Like that
Right.
is
There's
also
probably a core update between the beginning of the semester and the end of it. So,
yeah,
good on you.
Just listening to a webinar, someone talking about a paid search, particular thing, that course that they're teaching. And one of their main frustrations is exactly that. They have to update their decks constantly. And there was a major change that came through, and she literally was going to present the topic the next day about how to do this, and which was no longer valid. And it was like, yeah, turn around and redo everything, which how many professors do that? Maybe.
yeah.
No, my parallel that I've used in the past of kind of the remote versus in person is basically, it's like applying to jobs out of high school. There's an application, there's an interview, and applying to jobs out of college. There's an application, there's an interview. Those are very different situations. The qualifications, how you present yourself is going to be very different between those two times.
Right.
You're going to learn so much about what it takes to hit the bare minimum, basically, for the post college versus the post high school. Very different situations, but they look the same. They look like an interview. They look like a resume. They look like an application process. So that's in person versus remote, just as different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So we've been talking on this for a while. Let's pivot to something a little bit more uplifting and talk about any weird and wacky or benign interview experiences. Ruthie, why don't you kick us off?
Oh, they're really boring. I don't
No,
have
I know
anything
that.
interesting.
So let's lay a baseline like you do for any marketing project.
I mean, I've had here's a fun tidbit that is still very on the benign side. I've never done an in-person interview ever. All of my interviews have been over the phone, and there was one video, and that was it.
Really? See, I find that interesting. That's an outlier in my world.
In part because in most places I was sort of moving to a new location, either moving to a new location or COVID hit, and so we were all remote.
Sure.
Yeah.
How have you made that work? I'm curious about that. The like, hey, I'm not in your area right now, but I will be. Hire me.
You know, how does that work? So usually it comes with a context setting and sort of a bit of storytelling about here's sort of where I am in my life and what's happened, and this is why I'm looking to move to the area. Now, the downside of that is if the employer knows that you're already planning to move to that area, it's really hard to argue for the employer to move you. So that puts you at a disadvantage. So there's a trade-off there. And in all the cases, I opted for doing the context storytelling of, hey, I'm going to be moving to the area, looking around, X time frame. Or in one case, like, I just got engaged and I'm moving, so this is what's happening, and we're looking to locate. So that's a big part of it. And honestly, it hasn't. I don't think that's been an impediment to in any of my job searches. Is I'm like I'm not in your state. Like I haven't found that to be an issue. I think perhaps it is more if you're angling to have the employer move you. But again, haven't been in that situation. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Alex, what about you?
Just trying to narrow it down. Got some weird ones, man. There's been some odd ones.
Yeah, I mean, with your, pygmy goat stories, you've
Yeah.
had a lot of weird jobs.
Yeah, there's some variety there. I guess two in particular, these were odd ones. One was an unpaid internship. I didn't get it for a city that was nearby. So it's like a summer internship for the city. And I think it was just based upon the spaces that they had available, but it created a really, really intimidating room because they basically had one little like school blue chair against a big table with 5 or 6 people seated behind the table. So you're just sitting in this chair facing this giant table of 5 people who you do not know. And they literally just did one question each. And they just kept popping back and forth between people, always asking these random questions. And you're just sitting there on this far too small chair, just no arms to it. And you're just like sitting there being like, I'm trying to answer your question and not be intimidated as can be. This was like a post high school kind of a job or something like that. So unpaid internship. Come on, people. They're volunteers. Just hire them. They're not really on books even. I mean, just put them in. You don't really have to do that big of a deal.
Yeah, I feel like ditch digger isn't much of an interview. It's like, can you
know,
lift a shovel? Yeah, do it. Cool.
Fantastic. You showed up and you showed up on time. Congrats. You got the job.
Yeah.
We're not paying you anyway, so whatever. Because that was one odd one. There was one I was a luggage handler for an airline once. It was during college. So the lovely person who was throwing your bags around, as well as the person who's on the tarmac, those fun little orange sticks guiding the plane. You get to do both those jobs, which that part was a lot more fun than throwing bags around. Part of that post 9/11, at least in the US, pretty strong regulations on who and who cannot be on the tarmac and inside of planes where there are no cameras. So big piece about that is you get a background check. So an FBI level federal background check, which is lots of fun. So I was thinking, great, fingerprints, send it in. I've done jobs like that before, government kind of work. So you have to do backgrounds, whatever. It turns out they contracted out to local, basically private investigators. So I was at this, he's like, can I meet you in a park? I'm like, hey. He's like, I'm going to be in the brown van. It's like, this is weirder. And literally sit next to this guy in this random brown conversion van that's all beat up and covered in food wrappers and starts asking me random questions about my background because he was the one who had been subcontracted out to do the background check. And then after that, I guess he calls tons of people that I know and gets references and all the rest, investigates basically the whole background. But to do the initial information, that was his thing. And it was like, this is the strangest aspect of it.
You got in the car, Alex. Like,
yeah, exactly. That
I know. It was just like
a bench in the park.
I was like, we're in a park. This seems good enough, man.
Anybody with earpieces around? Like, were you
right? I guess those are some of the more memorable ones. There's been a bunch, but a lot of it is just kind of standard in person. You do a couple of rounds of it, and kind of moves along.
Okay, so I'm curious about your guys' take on this, but so I have two stories. So one is leveraging all the information sources I possibly can to craft my messaging. And two is being successful doing what you're not supposed to. That's my cue. So the first story is when I was first getting out of my master's program, I had a whole lot of just random experience of, helping friends start things or, being a ghost writer, freelance writer, contracts, whatever gig I could find. Right. So I didn't have a whole lot of quote unquote legitimate experience. So I went through, and I can say this now because I became friends with the guy who ended up hiring me. But I found out through an open Facebook profile and his LinkedIn profile that he was a Minnesota Vikings season ticket holder for like the last 20 years. And one of the previous random jobs that I had done was to help a friend sell Zuba ties. And so as I went to the interview, I wore the loudest tie that I own. It is purple, yellow, and white here in the Zuba pattern.
So Vikings colors.
Yeah. So psychologically hacking, right? Very, I would like to say subtly, but there's nothing subtle about this tie.
Wow.
But then we ended up just talking about the Vikings and video games and all of the things that he was interested in. And it ended up being like, yeah, we could hang out, we could do work together. And that was why I think I ended up getting that job. My other favorite interview story is I didn't think that I would get the job. So I said, great, this will just be good practice. It was at a coffee shop. So that was automatically kind of weird because it was with, a bigger company. And about halfway through, I just said, all right, guys, look, I appreciate the time. But if it's going to be like a micromanaging environment or something where I don't have the freedom to just be kind of like set off on a problem, I will implode and I will probably bring down some people around me unintentionally. So we should just stop the interview here. I'll pay for your muffin and your coffee. Thank you for your time. I'm willing to walk away from this interview because I know myself. I can't fit in that environment. I found out later that by doing that, they knew I had what it took to stand up to some really intense stakeholders within the company. And that was the reason I ended up getting the job was because I was willing to throw it. So not necessarily what I would advise people to do, but it ended up working for me.
But I think that gets at something that's exceptionally important, which, we've talked about the crazy filtering process and getting your foot in the door to begin with. But then once you're in the interview, I mean, with the recognition that in some cases you just need a job, right? That is fully there. And sometimes you just need to do it. But in the cases where, maybe you already have a job and you're looking for a better fit, I think this is the perfect scenario for this. Be yourself. Bring to the table who you are and what you're going to do on a day-to-day basis, because if they're not going in with eyes open for who they're hiring and you're not going in fully honest, you're going to end up in a not great situation.
Right.
Because all of it, like, you can't hide it for that long, or at least, well, maybe some people can. I can't, right? And so it's like, I better be straight with, here's what we're bringing to the table, because otherwise you're just going to end up miserable. And this is particularly true if you're trying to get away from a current position, or if, the current spot you're in just doesn't fit. Well, don't set yourself up for failure for your next position. Make sure they know what they're getting into as well. And maybe that's your most valuable asset.
That's a really good way to also to start a relationship with a manager. I mean, that's one of the difficulties you always have as a manager, basically, is how do you work with that particular personality, theirs versus yours versus the rest of the team versus the stakeholders and individuals that they're going to interact with.
Yeah.
How do you make an environment that basically is going to work, for this particular person? And everybody's completely different. I mean, very, very uniquely different in terms of, I really need this. I need some time every day to work through some stuff. I need just have my heads down for some time and not be bugged by instant messages. That could be one person. Or I really need to start the day with, talking to somebody and chit chatting to kind of get me going and get me involved in the day. And that's the way I kind of start off. Or I just really need a punch list. And I need to hit that punch list, but it really needs to be defined out for me so I know exactly when I'm doing it and when I'm doing a good job or something. Like the range is all over the place. So that's a really good way to start a relationship too, of like, I got to be careful not to detail it out too much for this person, because they're going to see that as micromanagement. Then you walk away from that and you back off.
He has great dating advice. Like just be open from the get-go.
Be you.
Yeah. Speaking of which, that actually brings me up to one of the things that I cannot get my head around, which is this phenomenon of ghosting. I find it so disrespectful. Like, I do not choose to live my life that way. Um, I as a coworker, like, I'll give you a couple of chances because, I know life gets in the way or something comes up. But if you do it, 3 times in a row, forget you. No more. That's just complete disrespect. And I don't choose to work with people like that. Um, what, I've heard it on both sides where employers or potential employers are ghosting job applicants, and job applicants who either accept jobs or are in the process are ghosting. Which, okay, fine, you want to throw the interview, you don't want to get the job, don't show up. I get that. Like, that to me is a little bit more acceptable. But if you already go through the process and you accept it, and then you say, well, you don't say anything, you just don't show up, like, man, forget you. Like, you know, what are your takes? Clearly I get worked up more than you guys.
I don't know, and I haven't thought about it too much. The only commentary I have is just that I think our technologies and our ways of working make it, I guess, psychologically easier to ghost.
Right.
Because you haven't perhaps put in as much time and effort if you're just sending an email, or if you're just hitting that apply now button, or if all you have is an automated system on the employer side. Ghosting, that's the only thought I've got. I guess it seems curious to me.
That's a really good point about the technology. I mean, you stop responding to emails, that's it. That's all you have to do is basically delete or throw them in spam or make a rule, and you'll never hear from them again. So it's easy, a few clicks. I guess the other piece about it is just, I guess, going back to that phrasing of human or bot-like and too bot-like or too human. I mean, however it goes. But some of this is just the impersonal aspect of job applications and interviews. If it's really impersonal, you really are stripping away a lot of the important aspects of a job application and interview process.
Yeah.
So if it's so impersonal to a point where people are okay with walking away from the relationship, should have started to kind of foster and blossom, which is the start of a relationship between these individuals in a work environment. Yeah, I could see how people would feel not very guilty about ghosting them because, they answered the questions, but they don't feel a connection there, and not enough of a connection to care about the relationship, I guess. I've seen all sides of it. It's really frustrating. I can say, as a hiring manager, I had somebody who accepted a role and ghosted on their first day, and eventually we dropped them because they just eventually, like, it was a month or two later when they finally replied, and they're like, oh yeah, life got busy, and some family stuff came up, which meant I lost the job rec, and my team shrunk by one because of it. Lost a really good role, lost what I thought was going to be a really good person as well. And the team suffered as an aspect of it because we couldn't get the job rec back to repost it to get the next candidate or even pull in somebody else. Really frustrating, super frustrating. Been a part of a situation where definitely been a part of the situation where people, I've done multiple interviews, sometimes even final rounds, never heard from them. Really positive, we're doing great, things are great, and nothing. Like 5-round, 6-round interviews for the companies and nothing.
Right.
Really annoying. It definitely leaves a bad taste. I definitely don't have any interest in applying to jobs anymore at those companies. And also, I don't think much of the relationships that I created with those people who I interviewed with. So that really is burning a lot of bridges to do that to any individual. They're worth an email. Just be honest. We pick somebody else. I'm sorry. Have a good day. Whatever.
Well,
send it and get it done.
Yeah, and to our point about every platform having AI now, how hard is it to say, AI, write me a thanks but no thanks? email.
Simple.
Like,
Very
you
simple.
literally don't have to lift a finger to do it. Like,
voice to text, the whole thing.
exactly. You could, yeah, and you can even have them send it. So I don't know, I would be interested in maybe getting an expert in maybe doing an interview and just seeing about some hot topics on
An
this.
expert
That
on
would be,
ghosting, Dave?
no, on HR, or yeah, getting somebody an expert on ghosting to show up would be hard. Let's not.
You know, we should just do that next episode. Just saying, tried, didn't show up, and we could just say that for like the next 3.
Exactly. Yeah, it'll be like the Jimmy Kimmel, Matt Damon bumping thing, where, you know, if you don't know that, look that up on YouTube. It's hilarious. So yeah, it would be interesting to find out, because there are certain things too where, like, this process is so fraught with rumor mills and, you know, yeah buts, even though, like, you know, the company is supposed to do it this way, but they're probably not, just because I feel crappy and don't have any control over it. So it would be interesting to talk about some of those topics too. But anyway, thanks for sticking around. Like, subscribe, share, tell us what you thought was interesting, any weird and quirky experiences you may have had with your own. Any sort of like regional differences would be fascinating to find out. You know, any of you guys in Germany, Spain, or you know, South Africa, those listeners, I see you on the metrics, so hit us up.
That would be interesting.
It would be fascinating.
Yeah.
And yeah, thanks so much. We'll see you in the next episode.